Welcome to the stand. My name is Fatuma Sarah. With the current issues in the world, in terms of politics and economics, there is a shift in how political and economic events take place, especially in Somalia. Today on studio we have a social associate professor of international relations, Dr. Fatuma Ali. Welcome.
Thank you.
Just to start us off, there's a current election that happened in Somalia, and there's certain aspects within the country that is expected to change. In your own opinion, what are certain aspects that every single citizen in Somalia is expecting to take a new toll?
I think in two sectors that are very important. One is the political and the economical sector, and of course the security, which is attached to both the economic and political. I think we have seen yesterday when the president actually ushered his interim cabinet in place. So we are hoping by next week, the 22nd, when he's inaugurated, he'll have his team in place, and a team that will actually inspire a bit of confidence and trust among the Somali populace all over the world, as his election has. I mean, many people actually name him as the president of the people. So if he can manage to get a team that also inspire that kind of a feeling, it will be very positive. If also he will be, if he can be able to come up with national priorities in lines of politics, what needs to be changed, economics and security. And I think also he has already mentioned that in security, what will be his way forward. So that will be important. In terms of economics, if he can actually outline a different way of building an economy, instead of having the traditional way of what happened to the last government, of just having a dependency in terms of the remittance and international aid, if he can maybe bring aboard the diaspora in terms of becoming a very important economical powerhouse, and then maybe reviving some of the former industry, leather industry, the fishing industry, the farming industry, that will really help the economy, because the economy will actually help deal with certain issues such as the high unemployment level, and also the huge youth bulge that exists.
Yeah. And what are the main key issues that affect Somalia?
What are they? Sorry.
What are the main issues that affect Somalia?
Yeah, I think, as I said, the main issue is security. I mean, if security can really be taken care of, the rest will fall into place. I mean, first is security, also economic, to have a sound economy that will actually fulfill the expectation of the people in terms of employment, in terms of collecting revenue, and also the political system. You know, a political system that everyone feels part and parcel. You know, a political system that brings everybody on board. Yeah.
And you mentioned that security is one of the key issues in Somalia, and you are an expert in counter-terrorism activities. What is the main driving force of terrorism in Somalia?
I think it has a lot. There's a lot of things. I mean, that are root causes. I think also we need to go back to the history where all these things started from. You know, I know many people look at Al-Shabaab as an international terrorist, but I would also say it's also a nationalist group. And if the current president, I mean, personally, I don't see. I know there's been a lot of debate whether he should dialogue with them or not. But I think, looking beyond the aspect of them being an international terrorist, if they look at them as a national force in terms of a nationalist who want to be part of the politics, I think it will be helpful to see avenues of dealing with Al-Shabaab, like bringing them forward and asking them what they want. Because many people try to compare Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram, but what they don't understand is that there's a clan dynamics which Al-Shabaab has, which does not feature in Boko Haram. So I think the main security issue is dealing with Al-Shabaab. If Somalia can actually, the government of Somalia can deal with that, so that will really be positive. Yeah.
Is it right or promising to say that there's a remedy that can completely do away with Al-Shabaab in Somalia?
we cannot say it is right or wrong, but they can be a possibility. Personally, I think one possible way is to dialogue with them. I know many people are against, and when you actually dialogue with such a group, you legitimize that group according to international law. But I think the important thing is because of the clan dynamics that the group has features on, and also Al-Shabaab has been very clear with its demand of not having foreigners in its land, and I think the president kind of understand that kind of idea. So that will be a step forward. I think it's good to try all. It can be a viable solution or possibility to have dialogue with Al-Shabaab, and if they don't, the dialogue does not bear fruits, so maybe there'll be need for another alternative. And I think also it will be good if we can start with another from another position, not like the previous regime that would say we would not dialogue with terrorists or certain group. So I think also what he needs to do is to come up with a very creative, innovative plans and strategies to deal with security issues.
And since 1969, this is the first time that Somalia is having an election based on one man, one vote, but not in the contextualized form that we see in other countries, because normal elections could not be carried away because of threats from Al-Shabaab. Do you see that if possibly Al-Shabaab wasn't a threat and a general election where every citizen was to vote, do you see a possible way in which Somalis could vote for their leaders, not on the basis of which clan they're from or which tribe, but rather on the basis of their knowledge and their slogans?
I think this time it was not just about Al-Shabaab. There are many other challenges, The challenge of Somalia has a very unique election process, so it still would be difficult to have a one-man vote in terms of having people choose their leaders. It goes again back to the election commission, how elections are set, the accessibility to all the individuals in that country, registration. Somalia doesn't even have. They don't have even people who are registered, so it's even difficult because of that. And then secondly, also just by the sheer fact that Somalia has the way it is structured, federal state, so it will even be more complicated because, of course, there will be need for cooperation and coordination between the central government and the federal government. So then also it's not just the security, but also the financial challenges. So I would say this time it was a bit difficult because of all those challenges, and it was also ambitious for the previous government to even think that by the time they are done in those 4 years, they'll be able to have certain infrastructure in place, which right now the idea is for the next election to have the one man, one vote in democratic processes. But still it will be a challenge because there's a lot of things that needs to be done. First, people have to be registered, you have to set up a very good electoral body, you have to conduct civic education. Also, you have to deal with that unique structure of the clan-based voting, the 4.5, which up to now has been used. Now, how do you go around that kind of politics, the clan-based politics? So it's a bit challenging because of the uniqueness of Somalia as a country. And security, yes, is a factor. If security still continues, it also might be a challenge.
And Somalia is one of the countries that is being affected by the Muslim bans in the US, where President-elect Donald Trump, he actually signed a ban on several Muslim countries, for instance, Somalia. And how does this affect Somalia as a country, and especially the refugees who are in the Dadaab camp, who are in camps elsewhere, who are awaiting transfers back to America?
Okay. I think first it affects the reunification of families, because a lot of families are waiting to be reunited with their family members, as you said, through resettlement programs. The other thing also, reunification in the terms that there are people who would like to come back and visit their family members. That also might affect a bit of the remittance, because the more people who go to the US, the more that the Somalia or the Somali people can get as remittance from their family members. Sometimes also it can have a negative impact in terms of people who genuinely maybe need to go to the US for academic reason, for medical reasons. So all of them will be lumped under the same umbrella, and that ban will indiscriminately be applied to everybody. Yeah.
Some people are arguing that the ban could actually, in a way, help Somalia to build its economy, since most of its population wouldn't be going to America, but rather would be forced to stay in Somalia and make something out of their country. How true is that?
That is a catch-22 situation, not necessarily. I think also when you say that, I mean, yes, it's good to have a population in place, but of course you need to attract other population that can come. For example, if the ban is going to make other people get fatigued with the system, maybe in the US, and come back and invest in their country, yes. But for the ones who are going, it's a bit difficult, because it does not mean that by staying, maybe they'll be creative and they'll create an opportunity. Maybe the ban will be a wake-up call in terms of people appreciating, and instead of going for greener grass, watering their own grass. But also that is premature to determine that, because of course when you want to inspire people, there has to be other things that create or facilitate that process of inspiration, like the infrastructure, the security, the amenities, and maybe even subsidies that the government can give. So I think also this government can think of that possibility of how to make the population that is there be creative and own their own economy and be the movers and the shakers in that society.
And what's the major economic contributing factor that helps to build the GDP of Somalia?
Three things. One is the remittance that comes from the diaspora. Two is the international aid that comes from donors. And three is the domestic revenue, which is very little, which comes from the imports. And unless now the government thinks of broadening the collection of the domestic revenue in terms of having a sound legal and legislatures that permits for further collection of the domestic revenue, because up to now it's from the trade, from the imports that are coming from the trade. And then also looking at expanding the narrow revenue collection, because it's very small in terms of how that is collected, and also looking at the borders, you know, because sometimes it's very difficult to collect revenue when your borders are not tight. Yeah.
And the Horn of Africa has the longest coast, probably in Eastern and Central, and maybe probably even the entire Africa.
Yeah.
And also Somalia is best known for its fish and charcoal. What could the government actually do to invest in such certain sectors like that?
Actually, I think Somalia needs to go back and revisit in the golden era, you know, in the 80s and 70s, when the economy, when the idea of the self-sufficient economy existed. Somalia has a lot of opportunity. It's just a matter of tapping into that opportunity. One is the fishing industry, as you said, the agriculture industry, you know, sugarcane, cotton, fruits, and apart from that also other industries that are known, like handicrafts and leather. The leather industry is one industry that needs to be revived in terms of making shoes, handbags. There's a lot that can be exploited there. Livestock trading, you know, the meat industry. I mean, Somalia in the 80s used to export a lot of corned beef. So it's just a matter of reviving those industry and then making export out of it. So there's a lot of opportunities. I think many opportunities can be explored and revived. And apart from that also, even skills that people have acquired, you know. And the other thing I think that will be very important is to invite the diaspora to come and invest. Countries have done that successfully. Rwanda is one case, one example. And I think also most of the diaspora would invest if the infrastructure are in place. Also, there's need to put those infrastructure in place so that you are able to attract not only diaspora but also international investment in those industries that I mentioned.
True. And many Somali refugees in Kenya, they're expected to be repatriated back to Somalia. Is Somalia ready to consume back all those people who are coming back to it? Or if not, what are certain problems that it could face with the repatriation exercise?
Okay, right now with the repatriation exercise, I don't know if you're aware of the new developments. The courts in Kenya have stopped that exercise for now. And the other thing also, it will depend with the president, what is his main interest, if that is his priority. That the last president, Hassan Sheikh, that was his priority because of the nomadic thinking of bringing everybody back, because the idea if people are back, they can build their nation. So the other thing also, it will not be useful to take people back if there is nothing to go back for. In terms of security, the infrastructure, and if there is nothing that is being put in place. So I think in the few coming days, we will see if that will be in the priority or the agenda of the president. But personally, I think that the excuse or the main idea of repatriating the refugee in terms of security doesn't hold water that much. And you know, if that is the case, even if you take back the refugees, you still don't deal with security issues. You know, I mean, now there's a looming drought that is coming, which again, humanitarian, on the basis of humanitarian ground, refugees will still come back. Or you don't, I mean, you just take them back to the same situation. So I think repatriating back refugees to Somalia does not really solve any problem, not for the Somali government and not for the Kenyan government. Because if you take the refugees, what are they going to do in Somalia? It's not like you're repatriating a business community. You're repatriating a group of people who are dependent on humanitarian aid. So how will they even access that aid? I think there's need to ask a lot of questions in this and good planning, because up to now I think it will still not be viable to take people back. Where do you take them back in the first place? How do you even create that process of taking them back? You know, there are a lot of questions that needs to be answered, and it has to be done well, because I mean it is not a solution that you say when we take all the refugee back, our security will be better, and if they go back, they will work in their country. Maybe they have a bit of entrepreneurship skills that they have learned in their years in living in the camp because of their survival skills that they have acquired. That maybe could be important to take it back, but of course it's also premature to take people back, and of course they have to address that process where if they are willing and ready to go to invest in their own country.
Yeah, but some refugees actually, they're voluntarily going back.
Yeah.
Do they see a future that is way better in Somalia than in Kenya?
Yeah, I think definitely, you know, when people want to go back, there are so many reasons. Yeah. It can also be because maybe they are tired living here as refugee, maybe they want to go and start fresh, maybe they are committed to certain values back home. So for those who want to voluntarily go back, I think it's good to support those kind of initiatives, because they have their reasons why they want to go back, and they already see the opportunities that exist for them and what they want to go back for.
And what about the people who are in, let's say, countries like America, let's say just America in particular, those refugees that are being reinstitutionalized and to fit into the society? With the Trump administration, is there a chance that they could be forced to also come back?
I think maybe policy-wise, with the policies that are coming in place, maybe some of them might feel awkward or feel out of place, or maybe those policies might not fulfill the expectation, and maybe that might lead to some people coming back, you know. I mean, if people are not regularized, you know, and then in few days to come, Trump is going to, he has just announced that he's going to come up with another order. So we don't know if that is going to affect people. And I think people who live in diaspora, like in America, they all live in different forms. There are some who have lived there for many years, they have all their papers in place, they are totally integrated in that society, both in the economic system, in the political system, and in the cultural system and social system of that country. There are some who have recently just come, probably they're not that much integrated, both in that system, so maybe they might feel that with the policies that are in place, they're being ejected out of that system and they would want to come back. But I think for some of them, they would have a good reason of coming back. I mean, are they coming back to join their government? Are they coming back to venture into business? Or they're just coming back to stay? So I think also that will depend with the reasons that will bring people back. But I'm sure that many people will come back, especially people who are not legalized. I mean, since they're not legal, they don't have the legal papers, then those kind of people will probably maybe deported. Yeah.
Currently in Kenya, there's a fight against terrorism that leads to several counter-extremism, violence activities that are kind of degrading to Somalis living in Kenya. Particularly you as a Somali woman here in Kenya, do you face some stigmatization?
Yeah, I think also the other thing is that terrorism is now being seen as an import of Somalis. So when people see a Somali, the first thing they see is a terrorist, whether you're a man or a woman. So and I think also that is very wrong, because you just lump everyone and think everyone is terrorist, which is not true. And the other thing, I think the big challenge is, I mean, there's a lot of negative attributes towards Somalis. I'm a Kenyan Somali, and I face that every day. You go somewhere, someone is telling you alalo, warrior, or if you're in a check, they tell you wait, they want to check you 3-4 times thoroughly, to just make sure that you're not carrying a bomb or something. Or some people will engage you in a conversation to kind of hear the kind of ideas that you have. So I think also that is challenging because of the same image that has been constructed of being Somalis, and of course also locations that have been associated with Somalis, place like Isli. So if you come out or you say you live in Isli, automatically that brings the idea that you have affiliation or you are a terrorist or something like that. So I think here in Kenya that also comes from the fear that has been generated or constructed, that all Somalis are Al-Shabaab and all Somalis don't feel comfortable. They see Kenyans as enemy. They see this as that, and also because of the kind of demands that Al-Shabaab has made against the KDF and the rest. So I think that kind of negative energy sometimes is felt, and it has like a negative repercussion on people of the Somali descent, because I mean we have here Somalis of the Kenyan origin, and we have Somalis from Somalia, and I mean there is no need of generalizing and judging people on the basis of how they are or who they belong to in terms of their belonging.
Yeah. At a personal level, is there anything that a person could do when they're facing such stigmatization to stand up to their rights?
Yeah, I think also there is need of creating awareness and educating people, because some people are not even aware. I mean, like there are many people who don't know anything about Somalis, like history, just basically saying Somalis are Eastern Kushites. We have people of Somali origin. I mean, Somalis have just come from the Horn of Africa. If even we look at the pattern of migration historically, there are things that you can say. I think also there is need to engage, and also there is, I think also as Somalis, whether we are Kenyan Somali, we are Somalis from Somalia, we need to communicate and to dilute that kind of fear that people have. The idea of thinking not all Somalis are terrorists, because people come from a conflict-ridden country, they come with that baggage of violence from there. So I think also there's need to create that confidence and create connection where people understand and they can just reduce the fear, because I think most of these things is just fear. The fear that people have, the construct that has been made, what people see in the media, what people hear So sometimes generate this kind of fear. And there is need for creating network as well that establish this kind of confidence and also deconstruct this kind of constructed image about the Somalis, like they're all violent, you know, they're all terrorists, you know, things like that.
Yeah. And people in the northeastern region of Kenya, who a majority of them is Somalis, they feel in a way that Kenya is neglecting them. They're being isolated in terms of development, resources, development, educations, and things like that. What could be the main reasons for this isolation? Is it purposefully, or is it just something that just happens over the years?
Well, that is historical, the marginalization, you know, is historical from the colonial days and also from the regimes that came. And if you know a bit of history also, some of this thing also comes from the deliberate policies that came out of the previous regime, especially during the shifter wars, where people think that this kind of region, everyone wants to go and join Somalia. So I think it's that there's been a bit of disconnection in terms of that region and how that region is part and parcel of the main agenda or the government itself. So I think it's historical, and also there is need to kind of people from that region to really engage, and I think that is happening, to engage the government and to engage Kenya in terms of dealing with that marginalization, because it's true and it's obvious. I mean, you know, it's not that people are saying there's marginalization and they're imagining it, but it's just a matter of understanding the historical aspect to that marginalization, which also is part of the continuing process. Yeah.
Do you personally support the presence of KDF in Somalia? Like, do you see it best suit to Somalia's interests to have them there?
I am a bit skeptical to say if I support or not, because you know, there's a lot of things that we need to look at and understand before we put forward. You know, I mean, this is a government decision. It is part of the national interest in terms of national security. And of course, this also comes, as a result of the spillover of the conflict of Somalia in Kenya, especially with the attacks that has come from Kenya, but that has come from Somalia. But really, if KDF is making progress or not, those are questions that need to be asked, and to see if Kenya is doing the right thing by taking the KDF there. So it's more or less the progress that I would say that would be important to look at. But personally, I don't have a stand. I don't see, it's like I'm not really in for KDF being there, and also not KDF not being there, you understand?
Yeah, I get
so it's just a mixed feeling that I have in the first place about everything. And you know, right now, KDF is part of the AMISOM. So that's another kind of perspective looking at that. Yeah.
What's the relationship between the Somali government and the UN?
And the UN, I think now it will depend with the new president how that relationship will be forged. But I think up to now it looks like the UN is has welcomed the initiative of that has come out of the election, that there's a new head of state, and probably it will depend on how they work together. So right now there's a new guard in place, you know, things are changing. It's going through there's a transition. Previously, I think you saw that the previous regime did have a really good relationship with the UN, but now so it will depend with how this will be cultivated by the current president. Yeah.
There's kind of a struggle between Somaliland and Somalia, where Somaliland wants to be recognized as an independent state from Somalia. Do you think that maybe if Somaliland and Somalia could unite as one country, there would be a possible reinforcement programs that can actually ensure Somalia to be to be like a prosperous country as it used to be before?
From where I stand and from my perspective and analysis, I think Somalia has moved quite far. So if they're to come back and join Somalia, it will be a bit complicated. It will be complex. And if we're to problematize this relationship, I think where Somaliland stands now, it has moved very far. They've created their own identity as Somaliland. They've created their own structure as Somaliland. They've created a lot of things as Somaliland. So to come back and join Somalia, it will be a bit complex. And that relationship will not be very smooth. It's not like the experience that Puntland has with Somalia. And you know, Somaliland, they have already created an infrastructure where they have elections, they have a lot of things, and they enjoy a lot of bilateral relationship with other countries. So it will be complicated, but also it will depend on if really Somaliland see themselves as part of the greater Somalia and they want to join Somalia, because all those years I think the identity has moved and they have moved on. So it will be a bit problem. I know that there's a lot of talks in terms of that, and there is other perspective from Somalia that they would like to join Somalia, but there's another other perspective that will not. So it will depend. But I think it's going to be a bit complicated because Somaliland has moved quite, they have drifted a lot from Somalia in the past years.
Yeah, true. And what about Somalia's relations to countries within its region? For example, Ethiopia, we have Kenya.
Yeah, so that is very interesting, and I think it will be fascinating to see the approach of the current president, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo. How will he relate to the Ethiopians and Kenyans, especially in terms of security, because this relationship also is very important in that the fact that Kenya even has its military there. So what will be its relationship? Because the previous regime worked very well with the Kenyan government, you know. So it will depend right now what will be his focus and his priority. Of course, he has previously worked under the previous regime as the prime minister then with Kenya, but now it will depend with the kind of priorities that Somalia will set in its relation to its regional neighbors, which, you know, I think it's very important to realize as a country you are in a region, but also how your relationship are with others, and that's all about international relations, geography, and geopolitics around these areas, and of course also understanding the interest that the other countries might have in your country.
Yeah, and just to go back maybe to tribal issues in Somalia, is there a way that is there activities or ways that the government could actually help its citizens to unite against coalitions of tribal clashes and clans?
So I think one thing that there is need for in terms of creating a national identity in Somalia is reunification. I mean, having a leader who can reunite all the people regardless of their clan, and a leader who can be accepted by everyone and no one can judge him that he's favoring his clan. If Farmajo can actually foment that and create that identity, it will really help Somalia a lot. And I'm having a feeling that this is what is going to happen, because you could see recently, I mean, immediately after he won the election, people celebrating all over Kenya, Somalis around across the world. So that's a good sign. And the fact that people already see him as the president of the people, that could also be another good sign. So if they can, there's that unification right at the bottom, it can actually trickle down up to the from the top up to the bottom. So if you can manage to create that image, you know, that he's a president of everyone, regardless of the different clans, regardless of everything, and he brings everybody on board, all the clans, both men and women, and also the gender aspect. So, and also not only just the Somalis in Somalia, but also bringing the diaspora also closer to the people in Somalia, that will really be helpful for Somalia to move forward and reconstruct and rebuild its country, and now usher in a new era in terms of peace and prosperity in that country.
And what's the government arrangement in Somalia look like? Do we have a prime minister? You know, the relationship between the president and his subordinates.
Yeah, you know that the president has to appoint his own prime minister, and that. So now he has an interim government in place, but it's until next week when he will be officially inaugurated. That's when we will know. You know, and I think this is one thing that I think the president will do in consultation with other stakeholders. You know, maybe his party and others, to come up with his own cabinet and the government in place.
Just to finish up, what's your general stand on the outlook of Somalia?
Right now, I think with what has happened in the last week and what is happening right now, a bit of positive vibes is coming out, and I just hope that maybe Farmajo will be a game changer and do things differently, and have its priority very clear. And not only that, I think there's a lot of expectation as well on him. So I just hope and pray for the Somali people that the expectation will be fulfilled, that he will be the person who will reunite the Somali people, the person who will come up with creative and innovative way of dealing with security issue, and then the people will have a bit of confidence in terms of their leaders and the system in place. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatuma Ali.
Thank you.
That is all that we have for you today in The Stand. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum.